option as the law stands at the moment. Felicity McMahon, thank you for coming onto the programme. Plans to give tenants more security could lead to a shortage of rented property, according to landlords. Under a new law, tenants in Wales will be given 6 months' notice to move instead of 2, unless there's been a breach of contract. Evictions will also be banned in the first 6 months of a tenancy, effectively guaranteeing a year free from the possibility of moving. Scotland has already introduced this, and England is planning to as well. The Welsh Housing Minister, Julie James, said the law change planned there for next year would improve the rental market for everyone.
This Amendment Act legislation is to extend the notice periods that people will have if they're going to have what's called a no-fault eviction. And we're doing that because we think that the 2 months in the original 2016 Act, on reflection, isn't a long enough period for people to find another secure place to live, particularly if they're families, so that their children can have continuity, for example, in the same school, or that they can have continuity of childcare or whatever other arrangements they have in place. And overall, we want the private rented sector to be much more of a sector of choice for people when they're looking for a home. We hope it will give landlords, good landlords, security of income for the tenant. And most landlords in Wales are good landlords. And we hope also it will drive the bad landlords out of the sector.
The Welsh Housing Minister, Julie James. The new law is designed to help people like Darren Pitts-Whitby. He and his wife and 6 children had to leave their home in North Wales.
We were given 2 months' notice with no warning. We'd not missed any payments. We'd kept up the property. We'd looked after the property as best we could. And it was just, don't want you there anymore, get out. I mean, it was that blunt. 2 months, go. We ended up moving into a caravan that we were forced into because there was nothing else available. We were there for 10 weeks, and the council then forced us to move from there into a house that wasn't even signed off ready for being reused. The new law was 6 months. It will help some families out a lot because 2 months just doesn't give you any time to do anything. By the time you've thought about it, the 2 months is gone, and trying to find somewhere and organise it in that short time is really hard work.
Darren Pitts-Whitby. Douglas Haig is from the Residential Landlords Association, and John Pusey is the director of Shelter Cymru. John Pusey, how important could this change be for people like Darren Pitts-Whitby?
Well, I think it could be very important indeed. Nearly half of all households in the private rented sector in Wales are what is called monthly rolling tenancies. In other words, they're not part of a fixed term, 6 months or longer. So they're all susceptible to 2 months' notice. And as the Minister said then, the profile in the private rented sector now, profile of people in the private rented sector is quite different from what it was in the past. Many more families with children, families who've put down roots in the community, children going to local schools, and the idea that 2 months' notice is enough time to find somewhere else that's appropriate, affordable, and suitable is completely ridiculous. And we know that from our own casework. We get a disproportionate amount of work from the private rented sector in Wales in our own casework. Many of those people are coming in to us in a crisis situation because they've been issued with a no-fault eviction. Simply not enough time, and clearly 6 months will be a significant improvement.
Douglas Haig from the Residential Landlords Association. What do your members think of this new law?
Well, I think there's certainly a recognition that the private rented sector has evolved considerably and matured over the last 20, 30 years, and that there's an acknowledgement that we do need to look at how we revise things and cater for the different demographic that's currently in the sector. We are sympathetic to that, but the problem is it's how the proposed changes are being put forwards. The Minister talks about the no fault eviction, but the problem is that that's not really true. It's actually a no reason given eviction, and that our members very often use the Section 21 to end a tenancy for things like rent arrears or antisocial behaviour. Over 83% of our members have used Section 21 for rent arrears.
But there are other ways of evicting people in that category, aren't there? There's what they call the Section 8.
Yeah, absolutely right, and I think that's what we're looking for really, is that this change is being made without without rebalancing things on the other side. The Section 8 route is very lengthy. The court processing time is over 22 weeks at this point in time, so it could be up to 6 months that you go through that process without possibly receiving rent. And also there's things like you have to go to court, which is both intimidating and difficult for both the landlord and the tenant, and it's a much more expensive process. So what we would like to see is a balancing of that before these changes go ahead. And there's a few technical things as well that we would like to see in the current proposals, which mean that we could probably support them a bit more.
John Pusey, do you agree that there needs to be more balance in this new law?
Well, my organisation's been campaigning for the replacement of no-fault evictions entirely with something that has a set of grounds that better balances the obligations and rights of both landlords and tenants. But I think in the meantime, this is an important step forward. I completely agree, and Douglas and I have talked about this before, about the problems of access to justice. There is an issue there. But at the same time, we think it's really important. We can't wait for that to be sorted, in our view, while many households are being thrown into crisis situations with just 2 months' notice. And that creates problems for the services that are trying to help them as well. I think the issue that landlords are using no-fault evictions for other reasons, it really does show up the problem here, that landlords sometimes will be acting as judge and jury. And I think what's important is that there's an independent overview of the reasons why a landlord might be given, and those need evidence to prove as well. And that's why I think it's really important that the court is brought into this.
Douglas, what do you say?
Well, we've been talking about access to justice, and Wales doesn't have direct control over the court system itself, but it does have access to tribunals. And we've been talking about this for 7 or 8 years now, when the base law that this is coming in over the top of was first introduced. So it's a bit frustrating that we're saying, well, we've got to go ahead and make these changes now before we reform, because there's too many things that are going on in the marketplace which require it. So I think we really need to go back to this, look at it. It's a really good opportunity for Wales to show that they can be a leader on this side of things, and because this access to justice isn't just about the eviction process, it is about getting people to actually comply with tenancy agreement, whether that's the landlord complying with their side or the tenant complying with theirs.
Douglas Haig from the Residential Landlords Association, John Pusey from Shelter Cymru, thank you both very much. We've had an email